Hello and welcome back to Tinker Talks Guns. Today we're going to be talking about a 7mm Pinfire pocket revolver. And this one is of unusual quality. It's really nice, as you'll see in more detail in the tabletop. It is tiny, designed to be carried in a pocket with a fold-down, double-action only trigger. And the trigger pull is very heavy, probably 15 pounds or more. But it's commendably smooth. Now, the heavy trigger pull isn't really going to affect accuracy because there's not even a pretense of sights on this pistol. So it was intended for use at very, very close range. Now, Pepperbox revolvers are those weapons where the cylinder and barrels are made all in one unit. And they generally weren't made very large because if you get above a certain size, it becomes really heavy. And they never enjoyed the success that revolvers did because, frankly, they're not as good a weapon. Again, difficult to aim, difficult to hit at any kind of distance, and heavy for their size. Now, they were around from somewhere in the mid-19th century, and by the dawn of the 20th century, they'd pretty much gone out of production. And this one, being a Pinfire, was probably out of production rather sooner than that. Pinfire was an alternative form of ignition where there was an internal percussion cap and a pin sticking out the side that was centered in the percussion cap so that when the hammer came straight down on top of it, it would set it off. It was a good way to make a metallic cartridge, but it wasn't the best way. And the best ways eclipsed it in relatively short order. Pinfire arms were made of shotguns, rifles, but mostly handguns, and particularly revolvers. There is a previous video of a 7mm Pinfire revolver on the channel, and this fires the same cartridge, which is quite small and quite low powered, comparable maybe to 22 of the 19th century, 22 short, that is, of the 19th century, even though it fires a bigger, somewhat heavier bullet. There's very little room for powder in the case. So, I have not chronographed this because these loads are an incredible pain in the ass to make. And I have to make them because nobody sells them. There are kits available to make them, but they're very expensive by my standards. And they're interesting arms overall. We're going to go to the tabletop in a minute and get into the weeds on this a little bit. And before we do, shout out to my supporters on Patreon. It's very much a shoestring operation and your contributions help more than you know. Also, thank you to channel benefactors, those individuals and businesses who have contributed to the channel in innumerable ways and really helped make this work. And that includes the local collector that is allowing me to present this antique firearm. And yes, it is an antique, manufactured prior to 1899, because Pinfires were pretty much manufactured before 1899. And I was unable to find any proofs on this and no maker's markings, which seems a little unusual because it's really quite a well-made little gun. So let's go to the tabletop and have a quick look at that. So we're zoomed in quite close because this is a really small pistol. Now, unusually for Pepperbox revolvers, all the barrels are rifled, which theoretically improves accuracy, except there's no way to aim it other than simply pointing it at the target. You can see right here, there is a safety catch that props the hammer up so it can't strike a cartridge. When you release it, the hammer falls. Now that's not going to set off a Pinfire cartridge, but probably you would organize it so that the hammer was between the pins and the safety was just an added little factor. To activate the safety, you have to partially pull the trigger. It's not the best system in the world, but it was early days, and they didn't really know what the best system was. Now you can see the details on this is this cross-hatching with these little silver-colored pins all along the back strap, some on the sides of the frame, and all around the cylinder. And it's really very, very nicely done. Everything about this weapon, the fitment of the loading gate, the quality of the finish and the details, the fact that the washers for the grip screw are all indexed and cut in. And this appears to be maybe, this could be ebony, but I suspect it's gutta percha, a type of hard plastic. The hammer, as you can see, comes up and over so that it will strike directly down on top of the pin when it's indexed. Loading is done through a side gate, which pops open. There's a retainer spring here, very nicely screwed to the side. Provides very positive lockup for that. And then a cartridge is inserted through here, or you can rotate the cylinder clockwise to check all the chambers and make sure it's unloaded. There are 6 chambers, by the way. The cartridge is, again, very small, 7mm. And these are made by me, one at a time by hand, from 30 caliber bullet jackets that are sold for people who swage their own 30 caliber bullets. Small hole drilled in the side with a pin inserted, and inside, this faces into the inside of a percussion cap, so that when the pin is struck, it sets off the percussion cap, which detonates the very modest charge of black powder and sends the bullet on its way. Now, I doubt that the original bullets were this shape, but my options for 7mm lead bullets are pretty limited. These are actually cut down from a 277 diameter bullet. And this one has a little felt pen marker on it. And you have to, when inserting them, you have to make sure that the pin lines up with this slot at the back of the chamber. Oh, let's get that in frame. So you can see, and then you pop the loading gate closed, and the gun will then operate normally with the double action trigger pull, rotating the cylinder and firing the round. Now, to remove a cartridge, either spent or otherwise, there is a pin that screws out of the handle, and it takes quite a few turns, so you're not likely to lose it by accident. And then that's simply inserted into the front of the cylinder to push the empty cartridge out. And while it's not a good idea to dry fire antique arms, on these, the hammer strikes solidly against the frame. You can see there's a gap even with the hammer at rest. So it's not really hitting anything that matters. So here's the trigger pull. Hammer comes back to about 45 degrees and then drops. And of course, it's right in the way of aiming down the pistol as you fire. Again, a very short-range proposition. But I love the details of this pistol, and it is very well made, and you can see that it's rifled from these grooves visible even at the end of the bore. That was kind of a 19th century thing. We don't really get it in more modern firearms. And you can see, again, even though I have a very large hand, this is obviously very compact. And it is just a fantastically neat little gun with great details, and just the finish is very worn and patinated, but the mechanical condition of the gun is basically perfect. Let's reset that safety. And really glad I got a chance to examine this and show it to you all. And the owner did encourage me to fire it. Pepperboxes, as mentioned, fell out of favor because it's just not as good as the Revolver. And centerfire ones with the hidden with a hidden mechanism were easier to aim. But with each barrel being different and indexing separately, there's, again, no really good way to put sights on them. So they remained a short-range proposition that was relatively heavy for what you got. So they did not persist past the 19th century. And, the revolver was just a better mousetrap. So these were never really in competition. Likewise, the 7mm Pinfire was a clever way to make a fully self-enclosed metallic cartridge. But a rimfire was easier and better. First of all, you don't have to index it when loading it. And for repeating arms other than revolvers, a Pinfire is just not going to work. Then centerfire came along, and that was the end, because centerfire cartridges could be made more powerful than Pinfire or even rimfire cartridges. So they're kind of a sidebar in firearms history that just didn't make the grade and stand the test of time. But some of them are wonderful arms, very well made, lots of very interesting details. And this one is just fantastic. So thank you again very much to the collector that allowed me to show you this. And that's it for this time. Very cool gun. Anyway, I hope this finds you well. Stay safe, take care, and I'll talk to you again real soon.